So I've been thinking recently about Kabukicho and to some extent Shin-Okubo. I wonder if we could say that these areas have really become internationalized, particularly Okubo-dori, for example. When you walk along the street around Shin-Okubo, it almost feels as you are no longer in Japan. Of course, it's well known as Korean town, but beyond Korea, there are now all kinds of Asian shops and restaurants. I've heard that something like 1 in 7 people in Shinjuku in a foreign resident, but just from walking around, I don't really get the impression that the atmosphere have become particularly tense or hostile, as recent YouTube movies tells us. I haven't been to Shibuya much recently, so I can't really compare, but as far as Shinjuku is concerned, perhaps immigration has happened in a relatively smooth way. The foreign population has increased, but I don't feel that public safety has noticeably bad. Apparently things were much rougher in the past, especially in the 1990s. There are probably many reasons for that. Maybe a large number of surveillance cameras has something to do with it. Since around 2010, one morning around dawn, I was walking through Kabukicho and saw 3 black men sitting on folding chairs around Sakura-dori. I think it was somewhere around Sakura-dori that 3 of them were just sitting there early in the morning, around 6 o'clock, and they looked strangely exhausted, almost as if they are completely worn. I remember wondering why 3 people were sitting there on folding chairs in the first place. It's novel scene. Then a kid who is called Toyoko Kids, look about junior high school age. Maybe one of so-called Toyoko Kids came over and said something to them like, "You guys don't look very energetic, look tired, exhausted." I wondered that what kind of connection they had. It was a strange scene, and I think you would have been something like quite like that even in the 2010s. People talk about Toyoko Kids and other young people around there using the lab hotel district almost as a kit of living space. But I still have no idea how those 3 black men ended up sitting together on folding chairs on Sakura-dori early in the morning. I don't know what kind of business they are doing in Kabukicho. Speaking of black people in Kabukicho, I sometimes go around Kuyakusho-dori, and you do see black men working as street touts there. But there seems to be a kind of informal separation of roles. They don't usually approach me very aggressively. Maybe their main target is tourists. That made me think about something else. Perhaps people do not really come into serious conflict unless there is some kind of history behind the conflict. When I've been on YouTube, there are a lot of discussion now about immigration problems in places like London, but those situations have a historical background. You have things like Christianity versus Islam. If you go all the way back to something like Crusaders in the medieval ages, there are centuries of historical narrative behind those relationships. It's a bit like combat sports without, like soccer and basketball, without a story behind the rivalry. People do not get particularly emotionally invested in it. Japan and the rest of East Asia, on the other hand, do not have some historical relationship with the Islamic world. Maybe that matters. I've also looked at little at London and New York, and one thing that strikes me about Shin-Okubo and Kabukicho is just how densely packed everyone is. People are all squeezed into narrow streets together, making noise and moving around. Japan also does not have guns or drugs circulating at anything like the same level as in some countries like United States. So people are constantly passing each other at very close range, almost like being at a festival. Perhaps when physically mixed together like that all the time, it actually becomes difficult to develop serious hostility towards one another. This may be called as omatsuri in Japanese word. By contrast, in a country or city is physically large, like United States, for groups to separate themselves geographically, they can form their own blocks and territories. Once that happens, perhaps conflict becomes easier. In Shin-Okubo and Shinjuku, people are constantly crossing passes at close range. Maybe that is something quite characteristic in Tokyo. It's a kind of different or crowded, just packed. Maybe there's something like that's going on. I'm not sure. Another thing is that at night around the old Korea theater area, you see lines of young women dressed almost like maids. In Akihabara or something like that, that creates a certain atmosphere. Maybe it makes it difficult for someone to act overly tough or macho there. In Akihabara, you can still occasionally see foreign guys around places like Don Quixote, trying to project this kind of I am a tough guy impression or image. But in Shinjuku, that sort of attitude almost looks out of place. So even though the foreign population has increased, I don't really have the impression that the area has become significantly more dangerous. Shin-Okubo has clearly become much more multinational, but when you actually walk around, it does not feel particularly threatening. You sometimes see crimes online, things like Japanese shrines are being disrupted by Muslims, but it is not only the reality you encounter when you're walking around Shin-Okubo. Again, perhaps the reason is that there's no underlying historical narrative of hostility. The relationship between nation is different. Is that Muslim countries moving to Britain or the United States? Unfortunately or not, Japan simply does not have a history fighting wars against the Middle East in the same way. So maybe there's less historical material available for tensions to ignite around. Perhaps that is one reason internationalization does not automatically translate into worsening public safety. Maybe. I also went to Golden Kai recently in the peripheral of Kabukicho. There are English signs everywhere now. There was a magazine from the 1970s called Play Map that includes maps of Shinjuku, and when you look at the material like that, you realize that Golden Kai used to be a gathering place for writers, novel writers, editors of magazines, intellectuals, and literary people. Apparently, Japanese writers such as Yukio Mishima have become quite popular overseas again. Also, Dazai Osamu become quite popular. I heard in British recently. So for foreigners who love Japanese literature, Golden Guy must be a fascinating place. It already has a history as a gathering place for literary and artistic people. I don't usually go there at night, but I imagine there must be a huge number of foreign visitors now. Someone who works in the nightlife business once said something interesting to me. The thing is that if someone sneezes in the library, everyone notices because it is so quiet. But if someone sneezes in a noisy crowd, nobody cares. So she said, series might work in the same way. Kabukicho is like that. Places like Shibuya can feel very urban, clean, and controlled. It almost like freshly falling snow. When you see a completely untouched white surface, you suddenly feel tempted to step on it and mess it up. Maybe Shibuya is almost too clean, so visitors feel more tempted to make noise or behave wildly. Kabukicho is sort of different. It is already noisy, messy, crowded, and somewhat dirty. So making more noise is like sneezing in the middle of the crowd rather than sneezing in the library. It is certainly nothing like untouched snow. So perhaps people actually feel less and urge to vandalize the place or make a scene. I thought that was a surprisingly good, relatively good way of putting it. And when I think about it that way, maybe Shinjuku and Shin-Okubo are the examples of places that could become increasingly international while still relatively successfully managing to absorb that change reasonably well. That's more or less my recent impression of the Kabukicho.